Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers is a weekly program designed to answer all your questions, including the ones you didn't even know you had, and to clarify the endless debates around the wonderful and fascinating world of sexuality. Join us for real talk about sex from two experts in the field. Richard and Larry Siegel have over 50 years of experience as sex therapists, educators, counselors, and researchers. The Siegel brothers are recognized around the world as trainers of medical and mental health professionals.
Hello and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. I'm Dr. Ricky Siegel, a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my super awesome big brother.
My favorite role.
Cheers
to you.
And cheers to you. Thank you for joining us this week.
Nice. That's one of our favorites. The
lychee sake.
The lychee sake. It's so nice.
So
Go get yourself some.
Yes.
All right.
We toast to you for joining us for this week's Sex Talk, our weekly opportunity. Though every day should be Sex Talk Day.
Indeed.
Ours is Friday nights on the East Coast, and we get together to talk about whatever is important, whatever's going on. There's always something, right?
Always. So if you can't find something to talk about in the field of sex and sexuality, then, just pack it in.
Right. I often tell my students, you can study this for 200 years and never finish.
Exactly.
Because there's just that much to talk about.
That's right. So as we are beginning this week's conversation, we want to ask you to please hit that subscribe button, help our viewership grow. We would love to see that. If you want to hit that notification bell, you'll be informed when a new episode is coming up, although we've already kind of told them it's a Friday night at 7 p.m. But hit it anyway. It's just, not too much notification. You don't have to worry about that. If you're also watching us on Facebook, hit that like and share button as much as you can.
And we'd love your comments as well.
Yes, exactly.
Please
We would love to hear
free.
from you in terms of questions, comments, whatever it is you have. Just let us hear from you.
Right.
So how are you doing this week, my brother?
Very, very well. Keeping busy.
Yeah, it's been a busy week. Right? This is also the week, really kind of sort of the pre-conference part of it, but this week is our big annual professional conference.
That's right. Our professional organization called ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and of our professional home.
Indeed.
A little strange with a virtual conference.
It
but,
really is.
Hopefully next year we'll be together in person again in Tampa, I believe.
Yes, and we always look forward to
Florida.
that. It's kind of like a family reunion. It's a chance to get together and just kind of just hang with and talk with and learn from our peers, colleagues, and most of all friends. So
although I don't think we'll ever get anything close to the stories we've heard from the old dinosaurs in the field about what sex therapy conferences in the 70s used to be like.
Yeah.
But little thing called HIV came along in the 80s.
That's right.
Everybody sort of calmed down and.
Well, I think I was lucky enough, if I can use that word, when I first started and I first came in. I think my first conference was '89. And it was probably the last year of those 70s kind of activity. They didn't have any sessions in the hot tub that year. That was something that apparently was very big in the 70s. And we really, I think, I don't know if I can say this without it sounding negative, but it's almost like we kind of got more professional.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough that a lot of people think sex therapists are weirdo sex perverts that are into orgies and swinging and kink and nude orgy picnics at Pirates Cove. Right? Maybe back in the day when it was a new field and it was unusual for people, most of society to imagine why people would study sexuality. I mean, we have to remember that a lot of what we know in this fairly young field, right, even about human bodies and what they do during sexual arousal, was never studied until Masters and Johnson in
That's
our
right.
lifetime.
That's right.
In the 1960s. When you think of how many centuries medical professionals have been studying our bodies, right? And Da Vinci and Galileo, famously drew pictures of cadavers to help physicians understand
First
our
medical
anatomy.
illustrator.
Yeah, right. For centuries. But what happens to human bodies during sexual arousal?
Right.
We're barely 50 years in, 60, almost
Absolutely.
60 years in.
And go back even before that really we can say that sex ed started in the 1920s, but it was really all about purity.
Yeah.
And where we talk now about people embracing and understanding how their bodies work, back then it was about preventing those parts of your body from working.
Right? We
Not
talked,
letting your penis get erect.
Yes.
Not letting your vagina get wet. All of those kinds of things. So it was really this purity thing. It was called social hygiene.
Right.
And
We've
it
talked
was,
in the past about these nut job doctors like Kellogg and
Graham.
who would go into schools and tell boys about the evils of self-pollution and things like that, and the contraptions boys would be put to sleep with to keep them from touching themselves, or like little
That's right.
metal cages with spikes on them, so
You know,
they
and-
get stabbed
And when you look at
in their
that
sleep.
that stuff in the 70s, I think there was kind of an important piece to that too, because it was kind of a transition of going from this thing you're supposed to avoid to this thing we all experience, and
Right.
kind of making it more personal. We've seen a change in sex ed, again, from this purity and anti-pollution stuff to now about healthy development
Right.
and personhood.
But still, 60 years later, in the 21st century, we still have to deal with the constant clashing of sexual health and religious ideology.
Absolutely.
And people
Absolutely.
who still, in the 21st century, want to argue adamantly that sex is only for making babies. I loved it. We had Don Lucas on again last week. And then the first time I remember him saying, he asked people to just think about how many times you've ever had sex.
That's right.
And then how many of those did you have the intention to make a baby? Right? And like, how long are we going to continue deluding ourselves with this mythology about what's proper and appropriate when it comes to the most universal thing about
You're right.
being human?
But in how much of this are we actually going backwards? Look at this slate of legislation across the country.
Absolutely. Oh my
We're no
God.
longer, in some places,
We
you're
are
not even allowed to
quickly.
acknowledge that gay people exist. You're not allowed to acknowledge the reality of trans experiences.
Yep.
None of that is. And again, you talk about that whole thing, and that sex is about making babies. And for a lot of people, that's still
Yeah.
the same value. So, we've talked about the goalpost moving. And in some cases, it's moved forward. In some cases, it hasn't really moved very much at all. But in other cases, still, it's gone just like at lightning speed in reverse.
Absolutely. I'm supervising a young nurse practitioner who's working to become certified as a sexuality counselor, who's working at kind of a health department kind of agency in Louisiana. And they got a letter from the state attorney general that somebody made a phone call and complained about something, that if they hear that she continues to do any kind of comprehensive sex ed in the waiting room with patients, they will pull the agency's funding.
Yeah.
Not talking about abortion, she's not talking about it's okay to be gay, she's just talking to young people about STD prevention and birth control.
Right.
And they're threatening funding for any kind of sex education happening at all.
Right. I've just recently, as a matter of fact, today spoke with someone who's going through also certification and is certified as a sexuality counselor, and she is a physician. Right. Her heritage is Mexican, and she's a physician in a small Texan border town. And I was actually surprised when she said to me, almost what you just said, that she has to walk this fine line because according to the Texas Department of Health, who's licensing physicians, if she talks about sex with her patients, she could lose her license.
You know,
I mean, first of all, what the fuck?
when did
how
having a
insane is
conversation, right? It's just like when we used to teach about the history of contraception. And again, in the 1900s, it used to be punishable as lewd and lascivious behavior.
That's right.
If a cop overheard a woman having a conversation about birth control, right? And now, 100 years later, it's still the same way. If you talk about sex, we're going to arrest you or fire you or fine you or take away your funding or charge you with a crime for talking.
And I think this is a good thing for people to understand. This is one of the many reasons why really it is so important to vote, why it's important to get people into these political and administrative offices that actually reflect, or at least are remotely connected to reality.
Yeah.
Right? This has to stop.
Especially now.
I mean, it's getting ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
This is old history, right? This bad habit of left-leaning people to rest on their laurels, right? To go, we got it, okay. Abortion is protected, it's the law of the land. And, it's been under attack ever since 1973.
That's right.
And may very likely no longer be the law of the land if things continue with the political trend that we've been on, up to and including the Supreme Court.
Right.
So people need to realize it's an ongoing battle, and it's an ongoing demand for respecting the subject matter and the entitlement that every human being has to grow up free of exploitation and abuse and coercion and sexually healthy.
Right. And it's about making change, not about making noise.
Yeah.
You can wear all the T-shirts you want. You can go to whatever protests and rallies you want. And that's great. And people need to be continuing to do that stuff. But that's not the work. You've got to make it happen. Like you said, it's an everyday thing. We've got to keep at it until the change is happening. So you can make noise and you can wear your shirts, but don't think that's activism. Right? You really have to get active. It's kind of in the word.
Yeah.
To be an activist, you've got to be active.
Nice.
All right?
Nice.
So, it's again, this is where the politics becomes a really important consideration, because look at the impact it has on sex and sexuality and the individual lives of so many people that are affected.
Yeah. And you think it's like such a big ask that we just have sexual health the same way we have oral health and cardiovascular health and nutritional health. It's like, it has to do with sex, so we have to freak out.
Well, that's it. Do we try to hide from children that they have gums? No, but we try to hide from them that girls, they have vulvas and they have penises. We try to hide that
clitorises. Yeah, that's right. Let's
It's
pretend.
crazy.
Let's pretend there's nothing there, and maybe they won't notice. Right.
Yeah. So.
Enough for an intro.
Yeah, okay.
What is it, 8 o'clock right now?
No, we've had our Friday night rant.
Yeah.
Okay, I feel better.
We did have a topic in mind for tonight.
We did.
Right?
We did. Yes.
And it was remembering an old joke from a favorite comedian, Larry Miller, one of those New York comics. I have a picture of him somewhere. Maybe
From the 80s and the 90s.
find it and
The
put
80s
it
doesn't
up.
do stand-up anymore, but you've probably seen him in a lot of movies if you haven't seen his comedy.
And not one of the bits that he's most known for, his famous aging shtick and the levels of drunkenness,
Oh, yeah,
right?
those
All his
two,
classics. But he had this really funny observation years ago. We heard him say, what is it with these couples that get divorced and then remarry? Right? He said to him, it's like going to the refrigerator to put milk on your cereal, and you notice that the milk is spoiled, and go, maybe it'll be good tomorrow.
That's
put
right.
it back
Put it
in the
back.
fridge.
Right.
So, made a joke out of it, of course, and said, obviously, if your milk is spoiled, throw it out and get new milk. Milk doesn't unspoil.
Right.
But doing the work that we do, we have seen many times over the years that when it comes to relationships, it is possible for the milk to unspoil. And a lot of times relationships that fail people find a way.
Yeah.
And we wanted to talk a little bit about why and how people reconnect with their exes, sometimes even remarrying.
Right. Right. And I just want to take a slight, just again, as we're going to talk about this, but is it so much that the milk unspoils, or they learn to make butter or yogurt? They were actually able to recreate it, because that's a question that I do we want people to ask if they're in that situation, right? There is a difference between when people get back together, especially after a long kind of break. Are you picking up where you left off? Are you recreating that relationship that didn't work in the first place? Or are the two of you, or however many are involved, in a position where you're able to create a whole new relationship?
Right. Can the same two people go out and get new milk?
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And,
So-
and the answer is yes. And I think a lot of people just automatically have this knee-jerk reaction and think that's insane, that's crazy.
Right.
But there's a lot of reasons
Sure,
why
sure.
folks end up back together. I think COVID is probably going to present some new ones, right? I think there
Probably.
was a lot of relationships that ended because of the strain and unbelievable pressure and stress of the past year and being quarantined together, right? We've talked a couple times over
Yeah.
the past few months that only very briefly at the beginning of the pandemic, early in 2020, there was some folks talking about this, trying to predict a post-COVID baby boom, right? Because everybody's going to be quarantined together and
right.
holed up at home and nothing else to do but drink and screw, and there are going to be all these babies. And then by the end of the last summer, it was starting to be clear that it was so stressful and so depressing and so anxiety-inducing that reports were showing people were not having sex.
Right.
And levels of sexual activity were declining. And all of that quarantining was not having a good effect on a lot of people's sex lives. Now, though, people are talking about, what is it, the sexy vax summer?
The hot vax summer.
Yeah.
That's the phrase.
So maybe there'll be a post-COVID baby boom or
It could,
something.
people are
I
already.
read something about condom sales starting to
They're
increase.
going up.
Right.
Sex toy sales. People have already been talking about, especially public health people, have already been talking about a spike in sexually transmitted infections, which again is interesting as a concept,
Yeah, right.
because at the same time, over the last year and a half, testing has almost disappeared.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we do know that despite COVID and despite all of this, and again, this shows you where I think a lot of the variation in sexual behavior comes in, but even through all of this, there are people that are still been out there hooking up indiscriminately.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure some of those are opportunistic people who said, well, all these people are shut in, so there's going to be these people that are hornier than ever before, so it's going to be easier pickings, which is not necessarily the case, but there is a lot more of that.
Yeah.
So that could be part of the prediction, which in a sense would be an indicator that people are having more sex than we've been giving them credit for. But
Yes.
all indications do seem to be a lower rate of sexual activity, which is still likely to further lower the birth rate, right? Which has kind of already been a problem.
But I'm already curious to see what the summer will bring.
Right. That's what we have yet to see.
Yeah.
Hopefully, right, my fingers are crossed for people are going to get out there and start having sex again like never before, but to do it safely.
Right.
So we'll have more sex, but fewer babies.
That would be nice, right? People,
The babies that are not intended.
right. People being conscientious contraceptors.
Yeah, there you go. Put
So-
that on a shirt.
So, let's talk about what some of these reasons could be, right? I'm sure most of us kind of intuitively know why relationships end, and there's the usual suspect things that lead people to kind of forget that they're lovers, right? Money, in-laws, religion, kids.
Resentments and hurt feelings.
Right. We've known several couples that broke up over Trump's election.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, politics
absolutely.
and
So let me ask you this, since you brought that up. Is the reason people get back together related to the reason they broke up at all?
yes, right? How many times have we said that the opposite of love is not hate? It's indifference.
Indifference.
Right? That hate is a passion, or anger, probably more accurately. People feel hate, but it's that's not an emotion, not a primary emotion. But when a lot of people feel angry even with their lover, even with their spouse. A lot of people feel like if I'm angry at you, I hate you. I can't be angry at you and love you at the same time. So if I'm angry at you, I don't love you anymore, and I don't want to be with you anymore. And they break up. And then sometimes that anger dissipates and they realize, hey, I love that person and I'm not feeling so angry anymore. All couples therapists know this, that very often what presents as marriage counseling is already divorce counseling. Right? I heard this statistic goes around a lot. I don't know where it comes from, but I find it upsetting every time I think of it. But according to wherever this comes from, couples wait 5 to 7 years before seeking counseling. And I just think how much damage could be done in 5 years, right? So a lot of times it's already done, and couples feel like, well, neither one of them wants to say it, so they'll pay a therapist to say it. They'll go show what a hot mess their marriage is, and the therapist will say, you two should get a divorce, and they can feel, less guilt about it. Or it's just divorce counseling, right? They need help in splitting amicably, especially if they're parents.
I've found very often they're using the therapist as a buffer to help the other partner accept when they're telling them, I don't want to do this anymore. So kind of using that therapy, it's kind of a fraud, really. It's certainly false intentions that it's like, we're not here to work it out. I just wanted to be in this place where somebody can help you accept that I'm out of here.
Absolutely.
And that's often how the therapy office is used too.
Yeah, that doesn't sound fraudulent to me. I think that's a very legitimate reason.
Well, I say it's fraudulent because they're going in, apparently there's an understanding between them that they're there to work it out.
Right, yeah.
That's to me where the fraud
is. The pretense is,
right.
Yeah, right.
Right. So they've split, right? They're gone, they're done.
They've divorced.
They've
if they
divorced
were married,
or just
Exes.
ended it.
Right.
So why do people get back together?
First thing that comes to mind, again, especially nowadays, is the dating scene for a lot of people is a shit show. It's online. There's 200 different apps and hookup apps and dating apps, or creepy people looking for hookups, creeping around on dating apps, looking to take advantage of people. And I think it's kind of like don't know what you got till it's gone thing for a lot of people. They realize, well, this sucks. I had probably better off in the consistency of knowing there was somebody home when I got there every day, somebody I know. Going out with strangers all the time, getting to know people. I hear in my office, I hear people complaining about the dating scene every day. But I think I get the more stronger sense is back to that anger dissipating and people realizing that they can be very, very angry with someone they love and maybe need some time to realize that, maybe even a few years, right? And back to the first question, I think another common reason is people feel like maybe they can assuage their guilt by saying, yeah, we tried counseling and it didn't work, before they go to the divorce lawyer, but they're already planning on going.
Right,
there
they've
anyway,
already
right?
been done.
Right, so maybe the family says, oh, what do you mean? Why are you getting a divorce? Well, we tried counseling. So, it's our fault
Okay.
that they're getting a divorce.
So there's two things that I hear in what you just said about that, getting over the anger and coming back together, and the whole dating scene. And I think there's a whole bunch of issues that are intertwined in that stuff as well. But one thing that I hear in that is there is the ease of the familiar, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of smacks of that old phrase, better the devil you know than the devil you don't know.
Exactly.
Right? So even though I may not like it, it may not be what I want, but it's familiar, and there's a certain comfort in that.
Well, that's a good point, but unfortunately, we also have to recognize that familiar and comfortable don't always go hand in hand, and a lot of people return to really shitty, abusive, toxic situations only because it's familiar.
And that's what
Right.
makes it comfortable. See, that I would make a distinction there, that they're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
They doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Satisfaction versus gratification. They're getting that need met of something familiar, but they're not
But
satisfied.
they're
It doesn't
still
feel good.
unhappy.
Right.
Right.
And we see, and I think there's a part of that. We should do another show on that as well. Why people will go from abusive relationship to abusive relationship, and then
Right.
when they find themselves in a relationship with somebody that's caring and nurturing and supportive, they don't know what to do with that. They run like hell because that's unfamiliar, which makes it uncomfortable. And part of that also makes it unsafe. If I don't have to fight you off, my defenses aren't engaged. If I'm doing this, you're never going to get past this, no matter what's happening.
Yeah.
But if I don't have to fight you off, now I feel vulnerable. I feel my defenses dropping. Right? So I think there's that element of that too. But just focusing on the familiarity, why people will come back.
Yeah.
It's the anger thing, or I should say, not really the anger thing, but the dating thing. I think is a driver of a lot of that as well. I went out there, right? I tried it. I don't like it, so I want to come back again with the familiarity. And if people have had their relationships, they split up, they went out and they did try dating other people, and it's just not fun anymore. I don't really like it anymore, so I'll go back to what I know. Is there a way to project how successful that might be? If that's the reason why they came back together,
Right.
just because dating is unsatisfying.
Yeah, that's a good question. Because, relationships, like everything else, not to sound too cliche, but, they have to grow. I've said this so many times, every time I say it, I try and say it like I haven't said it a million times before. But an intimate relationship is an ongoing process of people learning about their own and each other's sexuality together.
Mm-hmm.
So if people have been together for 15 years and they are exactly the same as, if they got together out of college and they're still exactly the same, I do see a lot of couples in their mid-30s and 40s, and a lot of the complaints are, they don't have sex anymore, and one or the other is playing video games and on Facebook or whatever. They're just too distracted and like roommates.
Right.
And like I said before, forget that there was a lover's dynamic at some point. We talk a lot about how parenthood changes, often does damage, if not destroys, the lover's dynamic between people, which of course is one of the most ironic things of all. When
Yeah.
we remember how most of those kids were conceived. Yeah, I mean, maybe just kids growing up and giving, maybe if that's the source of the stress that the relationship buckled under, and now the kids are grown and out of the house, people can get a fresh look at each other, at the relationship.
Okay. Now, I would imagine, especially in that kind of scenario, that there would have to be some very definite growth that
Yeah.
both of those people have gone through in order to be able to come back.
Right.
In addition to just getting over the anger, what's really changed, in each of them and between them?
Right.
Can you come to realize your mistakes? and see that, wow, I can change this. I don't have to do this anymore. And could that be something that brings them back together? Is there real growth that people can have? Or is it, once you did it, you tried it, and just move on? Right? Which I think is part of a script for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, relationship counselors know, I mean, it's the theme of what's often referred to as imago therapy, that a relationship is like three things. There's one person, the other person,
Right.
and they're the thing, the relationship, the Venn diagram, if you want to think of it that way, where the overlap is. But they're both individuals, right? And their relationship is like the third entity.
You know, the way
they all three require growth.
That's right.
There's
That's
a
right.
there's a quote here from a marriage and family therapist named Jill Whitney, who says that most relationships end for one of three main reasons: mental health issues like addiction or other major mental illness, emotional reasons like how you handle conflict, or fit reasons such as having different lifestyle goals. All three of those, right, would require some work to be done.
Sure.
Whether someone has to
Sure.
do individual therapy, or they go to couples counseling, or both, right? Sometimes it gets a little crazy. We talk a lot about, couples counselors who tell a couple, you both have to have your own individual therapist because I'm only your couples counselor.
Right.
But something sexual comes up, they go, oh, now we got to bring in a sex therapist. And I just can't imagine telling anybody you're going to be seeing 4 therapists a week now and paying 4 therapists a week. That's just insane.
Yeah.
And those 4 therapists will never in a million years get together to talk about that case anyway.
No. That's
So
that's a big part of the
everybody's-
problem.
That's the expression clusterfuck comes to mind.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, if folks are keyed into that idea that life is growth and always evolving and changing for us as individuals and in our relationships, then I think folks can identify that and see how they can resume growing together by reconnecting.
Right. And again, I think what we said earlier, that in that piece right there is such an important piece, that if that is what they're going to do, they've got to be very, very clear that they're not going to recreate the relationship they have. A lot of people say it's like, well, let's do this over again, but we'll do it right this time.
Yeah, right.
I think that's failure, just right out of the gate. Right? It's got to be, can we create something different? Can we now create something new? There's certain questions that I've always liked to ask people in those situations. To be honest with you, I've asked this of myself when I've been in that situation before as well. What's changed? What's different now compared to, when we broke up and why we broke up?
Yeah.
Have our goals changed? Right? Have your goals? Have my goals changed? Has our worldview changed? I think we have to really be very clear at that about what is going to be different now, right? And in some ways, it's sort of what are the lessons that were learned,
Right.
right? What behaviors are we willing and able to change? Right? I think that's really important because that idea of the one partner and the other partner and there's the relationship. Again, when I was doing counseling and therapy, I kind of framed it. This is sort of pre-imago, I have to say. But I used to say that when I'm working with a couple, I'm looking at 3 different dynamics. I'm looking at one, I'm looking at the other, and then I'm looking at the relationship. But I don't look at the relationship as an entity. I look at it as a dynamic. And the sort of comparison that I always used was a Van de Graaff generator.
Right.
Like those, like the old science fiction, mad science lab, those 2 big orbs with the static electric field in between them. That if you ask a physicist, where is this event happening? Is it going from this pole to that pole, or is it going from that pole to this pole? A physicist will say neither.
Right.
Right? That neither one of those poles are relevant. The whole event is taking place between them. But we know what would happen to that if you took away one of those
Or
poles.
just separated them enough.
Just a little bit more. That's right.
Just enough.
That's right.
Spark is gone.
Right? So, for me, that third entity, that dynamic, that relationship is their interaction. Right? I've never really considered it a separate entity.
Yeah, that's
So I
a
think
good
those
point.
those
Yeah.
those therapists that say, "Well, I'm only working on the relationship. I don't work on the people." That's like saying, "Okay, I only work on flashlights, but no batteries." I don't want the power supply. I just want the thing.
I like that.
All right? So
Yeah.
feel free.
Okay.
No charge.
Consider it stolen.
Yeah.
I heard another quote. I don't know what the source is, but I heard somebody say, "We don't leave the person we fell in love with. We leave the person we can't believe they became."
Yes, I like that. I like that. That is really true.
Yeah.
Right? And goes back to what I asked you before. If the breakup causes or reasons are related to rationale for getting back together, and I think there is some of that kind of stuff, right? And that's part of that not recreating, but are we willing and able to have a relationship with this person who's different than the one that we started the relationship with? Are we willing to relate to each
Right.
other?
Reacquaint.
And start from scratch,
Yep.
right? Now, that's not easy to do, is it? Because doesn't that break people out of the familiar?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why probably a good idea to seek counseling if you're considering reconnecting with an ex. Do it with a pro.
Right, right. Now, of course, there is the reality that for some relationships, truly the best thing for that relationship is to split up and stay as far away from each other as you possibly can.
Right.
Right? But in other cases, again, we really have to look at this. And again, in a lot of what you're saying, I'm kind of getting this idea that we really can't make any grand pronouncements when it comes to getting back together. You got to figure that out on your own. You got to see if in this particular case, can it work? Are we willing to make it work? So kind of as a sort of wrap up to this, what would you ask patients or clients that are coming in considering that? They want to get back together, now they're coming to see you. Right? How would you define that process?
Well, I'm going to repeat what you just said. What's changed? Right? And how do you know in what ways do you feel differently now? And just, I don't want to flounder for specific questions off the top of my head, but I would really want to investigate and make sure they're going in eyes wide open and able to talk about why it didn't work the first time, and talk about their reasons for wanting to resume.
Would you also maybe ask them, or as part of that, like, again, at the risk of maybe poisoning the well, say, this is a risky proposition?
No, I think that's important. Yeah. Part of that, having your eyes open, not falling into the same traps again, or repeating the same dynamics, right?
Yeah. Right. Which is going to be hard to do if you just end up repeating the relationship.
Right, but isn't that what sex therapists do? Teach new routines and new ways of approaching and thinking about the dynamic.
Yeah.
Right, and calling out when we see a lover acting more like an angry, critical parent than a lover.
Yeah.
That'll kill the sex life, lickety split.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We've talked about that before. How we are biologically wired not to be turned on by mommy.
Yeah, or daddy.
Or daddy.
And if our partner's acting more like a parent, maybe sometimes that's another reason why folks might end up back together if they have raised kids and are no longer in that role, or get the help they need to remember that you're the kids' parents, not each other's, and snap out of it and get back to connecting. Right? There is one, and I'll end on this kind of goof question I've asked couples in therapy before. So if we had a time machine and go back to when you were first dating, and you're sitting around watching TV one night, and one of you turns to the other and says, "Hey babe, we don't have sex anymore, and we fight constantly, and we seem like we barely tolerate each other's existence. You want to get married? What do you think you would have said to that proposition? Now, I don't say that to make them feel bad about the situation they're in, but just to point out they got from there to here, right? And what do we need to do to get from out of here and either back to there or, like we're talking about, to the next?
Right. Right.
How
Find
do
a
we
new
move
common ground.
and get out of this mess we're in?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important. Right. Not to go back, but try to find a new place that you can be together.
Right. Right.
So, well, great. Well, thank you. I think that's a good capper.
Cool. Thank you.
All right.
One more toast.
One more toast.
With our ritual sake.
Indeed. And to you all, once again, thank you so much for watching, tuning in. Again, we would love to hear from you. We would love to have you keep hitting that subscribe button and like button and share button and all that stuff that you can do to help us grow. So thank you all very, very much. Once again, appreciate you joining us tonight and every Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers.
Thanks for watching Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us each week on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can also follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing world of sex and sexuality.